Listen up. There's no more excuses.
We're empowering those who want the hustle by exposing the status quo.
The days of ordinary are over.
It's time to crush mediocrity and start discovering your greatest potential.
Welcome to the Hustle Nation. To the Hustle Nation.
To the Hustle Nation. To the Hustle Nation.
Welcome back to another episode of the Hustle Nation podcast. Today, we've got a real treat, selfishly. NFL alumnus, and more importantly, former Green Bay Packer, Mike Wahle, who is the co-founder or founder of Process2Perform. And Mike, I found you, as I mentioned before the show, on YouTube. Obviously, YouTube knows exactly who I am, and I was listening to some, stuff about Milwaukee Bucks or Green Bay Packers. And then I saw this guy breaking down film, and I turned it on, and I thought, wow, that is really good. And then I realized a few moments later, I'm like, that's Mike Wahle. He used to be on the Green Bay Packers. I know him. And then I found, I'm like, what is Process2Perform? It's got to be something about leadership. So I followed you on LinkedIn. I checked out your website. And then here we are now. You are on the Hustle Nation podcast. So thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for being here. And it is funny how YouTube kind of grabs that algo and starts throwing stuff on there until you pick something good. I hope it was I hope that whatever you saw was entertaining.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I would expect that from someone who played in the NFL. But your breakdown of the film, I think this was back when the Packers were still in the playoffs and the season was still underway. I was like, wow, that's really cool. And then I realized that Process2Perform is more than just Mike Wahle who's breaking down film. And I would love to know, though, before we get into all that fun stuff, is your journey. And your journey from, getting into playing college football to the pros, and then kind of how things translated after NFL life.
Yeah, that's a long story. So I was playing Division VIII football, Roman Road High School in Southern California, San Bernardino Mountains. So
there's a Division VIII?
Yeah. So that's like close to 8, man. So like Division I's up here. Division VIII, somewhere around 9 or 10 is 8-man football. Like we had one stoplight in town, small area. Really, honestly, it's a great program now. My buddy, Coach Joe Girardo, runs it, and they're doing a great job. But when I was in high school, it was a terrible, terrible football program. One of the worst in Southern California. And I got really lucky. I was just like a tall, lanky, left-handed guy, and Todd Marinovich was playing at SC at the time. So, and I could throw. I was a flamethrower in baseball, so everybody just assumed I was going to come in and play quarterback, and I was going to be the next Todd Marinovich. I didn't know anything about football. I was a soccer, basketball, baseball player when I was growing up. So I go in, and as you can imagine, like I sucked at quarterback. They tried it for like 2.5 years, and I was terrible. Finally, they moved me to tight end. All the scholarships at that point are gone. I really have no reason to think I would get one. I just wasn't a very good football player. I was a basketball guy at the time. But Coach Charlie Weatherby at the Naval Academy was his first year running the program, and he was looking for guys who were just kind of those fringe Division I players. And I had good grades and whatnot. My mom I think my mom filled out the original questionnaire to go to the Naval Academy because it never crossed my mind. They ended up offering me a spot, and I went in. Lifting weights. Started taking football really seriously, and I was about 6'5", 235 going into boot camp. So when you go to the Naval Academy military school, you got to go to boot camp. So I came out of boot camp, and the cadre that was in charge of me, they didn't like me. They didn't like football players too much. They didn't think they belonged to the academy. So I was eating like one peanut butter jelly sandwich a day and running like 8 miles a day. 1,000 push-ups, all this stuff. So I lost 30 pounds, and I didn't have 30 pounds to lose. So I was skin and bones. Like my mom was crying when she saw me the next time.
Oh my goodness!
And I go to training camp, and they have changed offensive coordinators to Paul Johnson. Paul Johnson's a guru, but he runs a wing T wishbone offense. There's no tight end, so there's no tight end position. I'm sitting going, all right, I'm 205 pounds. They don't have a position for me. I'm in a military school. What is going on? And they made me a blocking receiver for my freshman year in college. So I'm like one of the few guys you're ever going to meet that played receiver in college and played tackle in college in the same span. So they moved me. Long story short, they moved me to the offensive line the next year. Paul Johnson. They led me to think they were going to put a tight end position in because I think they were afraid I was going to leave. I certainly had nowhere to go. But I was in the weight room all the time because I didn't want to get dumped on by the upperclassmen. So I was just in the weight room 5 hours a day, working, it's a lot of times by myself. And I remember Charlie Weatherby walked in one day and he just goes, "Hey, we love the way you're working." I was back to like 245, 255. And this is, early, like January, February. He goes, "We love the way you're working. We're going to put it in a tight end position. You're going to be it, right?" So I call my mom. I'm elated. I can't believe this is going to, finally, I'm going to be the guy, man. I just feel like this is how I'm getting in the NFL. I had this crazy idea from when I was in third grade that I was going to be a pro athlete. And nobody could tell me different. I didn't have a plan B. I could tell people I was going to be a lawyer, a doctor, an astronaut, whatever. But like, I only had one thing I wanted to do. And I had no reason to believe it. I had no reason. I think when you talk about guys that make it sometimes, or people that make it in these competitive environments, you just have to have this wild belief in yourself that you probably don't deserve to have. And I was one of those guys. But I show up for spring ball, and I think I'm going to be a tight end. So I think I'm going to get like, pick an 86 number or something like that. So I walk over to my locker room. It's number 66. And there's a pair of huge, like 4-pound neoprene knee braces in my locker. And apparently everybody's in on the joke but me. And Paul Johnson walks through the locker room about that time, and everyone's just kind of looking at me like, "You're an idiot," And he goes, and he's a savant, but he has this Southern drawl, and he just goes, he looks at me and he goes, "You thought I was gonna put a tight end in my offense for you, idiot," and just walked out. I was like, "Well, that's that." I got to start for 1 year in college. The Green Bay Packers, I don't know what they saw in me. Obviously Ron Wolf is from the area, and they had some scouts going around. Steve Belichick had a desk and was, calling his son Bill, who was up at the Patriots at the time. Bill called his agent Neil Cornrich. Neil Cornrich called me, said, "Hey, I want to buy you an ice cream." He flew down. He said, "You're going to go in the NFL draft, and this is how it's going to work." I said, "This is amazing." Oh, great. He was absolutely right. Ron Wolf took me in the second pick of the supplemental draft, and I got to Green Bay. And I held up for 3 weeks. The agent wanted a different contract. This is with Mike Holmgren. I know I'm skipping some steps here, but we go out to our my first day in pads. The Packers, Reggie, Leroy, Santana, all these guys have been out there for weeks grinding. Veterans, two-time Super Bowl appearance, now one-time Super Bowl champions, 1998. I show up like just happy to be there. Couldn't, pleased as peaches. Just signed a contract. Have money in my bank account for the first time in my life. Have a helmet, the green and gold helmet with the green Packers logo, the Green Bay Packers logo on it. And I walk out. Mike's like, Holmgren's like, hey, come over here, Mike. Come here. Hey, did you get what you wanted? And I start going, "Oh yeah, I can't wait. I'm so excited to be here." And he just starts dog cussing me because he hates guys who held out. And he hated agents of guys who held out. So he just starts dog cussing me and my agent, and tells me I'm not going to play that entire year. "I'm done with you. I'll see you next year." And this is like 5 minutes of my first day as a Green Bay Packer. I walk over to Tom Lavatt, and Tom's like, "Well, you've heard the news now. I got to coach the guys who are going to play, so you just got to pick up what you can from some of the vets." And that's how I started my Green Bay Packers career. I had never taken a pro pass set until that day when I lined up, I think 12 times in a row against every defensive lineman they had. And so kind of everywhere I went, it's been a non-traditional and non-linear path to success. But about 3 years in, I made the mistake of listening to some people that maybe weren't experts in the arena. And my line coach and the Packers told me, "Hey, I want you to get up to 315 pounds. I played at 295. And I came in at 313 and a half. I was super overweight. I couldn't move well. I did not focus on my technique. I didn't have a process. I just knew how to get bigger and stronger. And I'd always kind of just done everything on hard work up to that point. And I failed miserably. I couldn't move. I couldn't pass set. I got beat. I got benched. And it was kind of then that I realized I got to make sure that I own every part of this process if I want to have any kind of success. And that's really where I think my career turned around. I think in some aspects, my life turned around. And, I started seeking out kind of all the best practice methods of how to eat, how to train, how to work on technique, how to think about yourself from a mindset standpoint, whether it's, your routines, your habits, your behaviors, the things that you do before games to get yourself into the right mindset, whether you use cues, mantras, affirmation statements, all those things, you just start experimenting and see what's going to work for you, right? That's really what owning your process is all about. So I go through my career and I had a couple of injuries towards the end that kind of forced me out with my shoulder. And I went into finance for about 5 years. Joe Philbin, who was an assistant offensive line coach and the offensive coordinator later on after I had left at Green Bay, was the head coach of Miami. Mike Flanagan and Marco Rivera had both gone down there for a summer and said, "You got to go check this out. It's like so much fun. You'll forget how much you miss. You'll remember how much you miss football." And I went down there for 2 weeks with Joe. I had such a good time that I came back to California and told my wife, like, I'm going to shut down everything else. I just want to get back into sports. I just, if I'm going to, get one shot at life, I want to do the thing that I'm most passionate about. And I went and worked with the Miami Dolphins primarily as the NFL's first skill development specialist for about 4 years. And a lot of the stuff that I do now, working independently, both with young athletes of all different sports, and also NFL guys now, is really, if you are a confrontational athlete, there are really 3 things that you need to do to find kind of your ceiling, to find elite level success for your individual performance. You have to have the right mindset development. You have to be a technical master, and you have to make the right ownership decisions, which are decisions in the best interest of future you. And so that's really how we started Process to Perform. We started working with soccer athletes, baseball, basketball, football, any confrontational sport, really. And it's kind of evolved now to I work a lot more with maybe some more professional guys, some pro level guys, but still try to get as many of those young athletes at an early age as we can, just trying to help them along their path of creating that ownership in the process.
What a great story.
Awesome.
That's awesome. So I want to go back to your rookie year in Green Bay. And I kind of harken back to what it was like in that era. I don't recall there being a lot of players who, as many at least now, that were really into fitness and health. There were a lot of muscle-bound guys, and health and fitness was just coming along. But I also remember, allegedly, being someone who's nearby Green Bay, hearing about handfuls of players that like to go out at night and party, and that's fine. Like, obviously, players should have a life too, but you were kind of in that era where things were transitioning from, hey, we can still have fun. And now you hear a lot less about that, and you see athletes focusing so much more on their health and fitness. You had mentioned that was kind of a transition in your career where you were just figuring out what I need to do to really play at my best and get to the best point of my career. What was it like back then, and how is it different now?
Well, I'll say this. I think if you looked back at my generation, you look at the generation now, candidly, there's obviously the exceptions to the rule of guys that didn't work out back. There's a lot of guys that you'd be shocked they didn't have to work out to be excellent, right? But there are also the same guys who really probably didn't ever find their ceiling. I was always a big workout guy. From my days at the academy, spending 5 hours a day in the gym just to get away from everybody. You just kind of, you see, the great thing about working out is you see results fast compared to everything else. You're trying to lose body, if you're trying to lose body fat, for example, it takes a long time, man. But if I want to start curling more weight, I can probably go up 5 pounds a week if I'm young. Like, you can see results fast, and that triggers you want to keep doing it. I would say this. I would say the crew I ran with back then, we might not be the natural athletes that some of the guys you see today, but in terms of power, force development, speed, kind of, just athleticism, I would put us, pure strength. I'd put that group up with this group any day, because back then you weren't as interested in longevity of your career as you are now. You were more interested. It's like, I'd rather burn out than fade away. I want to get as good as I can. I'm going to, it's like all gas, no brakes. I'm not worried about the rest of this stuff. And, sometimes to your detriment, but you want to be the best version of you for as long as you can. And the minute you can't do it anymore, it's like, take a bow, get out of here. They make so much money now and they're so brand aware. And it's such you're really a mercenary these days, to be honest. And as a professional athlete, there's a handful of really good clubs and organizations, owners and general managers that make you feel like you're part of that family. But really, a lot of these guys, just because of the way the business is, you turn into a mercenary, I think, almost immediately, if not your second contract. And that's not a bad thing at all. But that brand awareness, understanding that your Instagram followers have value to you in your contract and all those kind of things. Like, it does change the dynamic. And I think a lot of that's more surface level than anything else. So while it certainly has changed, and guys were going, I mean, listen, you see guys going out and all the time now, they're putting it in your face and showing you, how well they're doing. I think that does change things a lot as far as, what you do in the shadows sometimes shows up on game day a little bit. And I think that was maybe a little more true back then than it is now. Whereas you can cut clips and you can, go on Max Preps and you can go on Rivals and you can go on ESPN and you can see these like one-off instances where a guy's in a bad position, he got beat, and all of a sudden he sucks and the other guy's great. There's like the way that we interact with sports has changed. So I think from a fan's perspective, a lot of that might look different, but I think internally you've got two groups of guys. You got three groups of guys that are just trying to make it. You got guys that are trying to, like me, who are just, hey, I'm going to be the best I can for as long as possible. And then you got this other group, and you can call that like the LeBron generation, quite frankly, of like, dude's doing it for 25 years or something like that at a high level. Now, did he ever max out? Like, we'll never know. But when you can play at that level for that long, you score 40,000 points, maybe go to 50,000, all of a sudden you're in a different category. So sure. That's a long answer for probably a question that didn't need it. I love it. Sorry.
So, Mike, one of the things you brought up, it's a term I've never heard before, was and it's your focus as the confrontational athlete.
Yeah.
Which I can kind of envision, but I'm curious, not just how you define that, but clearly you're focusing on that type of athlete as opposed to a non-confrontational athlete for a reason. Right. So can you speak to that?
Yeah, sure. It's the way if you understand the way the human body moves, if you understand all confrontational sports, starting with like the most extreme, obviously like mixed martial arts, fighting, anytime your value to your team, and we can talk about role players and this and that, you're the glue your real value to a team is your ability to win your confrontational matchup. So at some point during a game, there's a 1v1, whether I'm in basketball, soccer, offensive, defensive lineman, wide receiver, DB. There is a point in that game where you have to beat somebody. You either have to beat them mentally, you have to beat them physically. And if you understand the components of how that works, and you can master the components of how that works, you understand that that's really just a dance that the two of you guys are going through. And who's the better dance partner, right? Who's got the better rhythm? Who understands timing? Who can anticipate moves? The people that can do that win. People that understand body position, people that can enter that with a clear mindset, those people win more often than they lose. Technical masters win more often than they lose. So you want to start the way you think about sports, and you think about these confrontational sports, you want to start from that. That's the most important thing you can learn. And then from there, you can sort of, when you're talking to kids, when you're talking to adults, a lot of the coach talk that we use, you use, the term hustle, and you've broken it down to an acronym, and you gave me the story behind it, and it makes a ton of sense. And I'll say the other thing that goes with sports is we continue to say something to the effect, my coach and I go, hey, you got to play lower. Well, what the hell does that mean? Like, do I bend over more? Do I put both hands on the ground? Like, I can get in a real awkward position where my pad level is lower, but I can't perform very well. And so we give them these big ideas. And so when you start to learn how to train confrontational athletes, it's like taking all these big ideas, these poor worded ideas, and you break them down into very simple movement patterns. Those movement patterns can be absorbed, taught, and repeated easily by athletes until they become mastered. You create movement patterns, you build them up to create techniques, you add decisions, you get skill. You have a highly skilled athlete. You become a read and react athlete. And so that's the goal behind, I think, when you talk about real skill development, that's real skill development. How do you create the movement patterns and turn into techniques? How do you add the decision making so that you can have a real skill?
That's fantastic.
I love that. I'm really curious though, because when you transition from playing to working for the Dolphins as a skill development manager, how are you training not only athletes, professional athletes, but also people like us in business? How do we take some of that skill set and apply it to the business world?
Well, I think the easiest way to think about a competitive industry is that there's only one. Everything that you do is based around confidence. If you really want to break things down, us public speaking, having to present, having a debate, confrontational sports, do you have the confidence to go in there and let loose? And for me, whether you're in business, whether you're a doctor, whether you're in confrontational sports. The only source of confidence that cannot be stripped away from you is the confidence in preparation. Because if we're looking at sports, you're always going to find a bigger, faster, stronger athlete. If you're looking at business, there's always going to be somebody who might be able to talk a little bit slicker than you, maybe has a bigger bankroll. But if you have that confidence and that conviction in how you've prepared, and you understand that you've done everything you can to be ready for this moment, then you can go into every single opportunity that you have and take it for exactly what it is. It's just a chance to prove yourself to yourself. And you can take something away from every single opportunity that you have. And so when you apply that to business and you operate on the principles of we're going to do everything to prepare ourselves to be successful, and that's not going to be the same for everybody. So this idea that we have to hustle and probably the bad use of the word here, but you're grinding and you got to sleep in a cot underneath your desk in order to be successful, that's not true for everybody. And everybody has a little bit different way to prepare. But when you understand what your process is and you can own that, and you can continue to optimize it and tweak it and improve it over the course of time, that's how we find success in our personal lives. That's how we find success in our commercial lives.
That's excellent. Well, and you touched on it. And I think we talk a lot actually with hustle. I don't think it's the wrong way to say it at all. A lot of people have different views of what that word means. And it's usually because they're grinding, as you said, and they're not getting results. Mm-hmm. Right? Like you mentioned it with weightlifting. I mean, Chris and I have talked about this too. I know for myself, a lot of my work habits came from playing sports and weightlifting as a kid. Because to your point, lifting is one of those things that it's almost the easiest, earliest thing where you can see effort creates result. Effort creates result, right? Versus so many other things, there's such a disconnect between the two that it almost trains your brain. Okay, just keep focusing on the effort and focus. And, you can't just walk into a gym and do nothing either. I'm sure, a lot of people did that as well.
And so it's like the curiosity and the willingness to go find that thing that's going to optimize you. And, it's super rich. Like right now in sports, and I'm sure it's data collection. Data collection has a problem in business, sports, because there's context involved with everything. And data information without context is useless. It's actually detrimental to your performance more often than not. Now, in the case of sports, for example, this might be contextually fun because fans who people don't know about sport can go on Twitter and start spewing out some stats, but without context, those stats mean nothing. And I think movement or hustle without purpose means very little as well, especially as you continue to rise up the ranks of competitiveness. And my son said something to me this weekend. We were over in Germany playing soccer, and he said, I don't think these two games against these really good teams. And he goes, I don't know if I've ever, he's like 15 years old. And he's a hardworking kid. And he goes, I don't know if I've ever had that. I've put that many miles in of purposeful work in my life, just because the style of the play, the aggressiveness, the structure, the people that he's playing with are a little bit higher level. He goes, I don't know if I've ever put that much purposeful work in a game or a practice in my life. And I want to learn how to recreate that on my own. And I think when you get to that, you flip the switch and go, oh, there's a difference here between just putting in time and putting in purpose, dedicated work. Man, you can really open up the doors to success.
Completely agree. So as you look at your different transitions, one of the things that I get the sense of is that you almost had that badge of underdog kind of at each step of the way. And, I think a lot of times, especially today, I feel like there's a lot of young athletes. They need so much praise. They need so much buildup. And I don't know if that's because, like we talked about before I started, if it's the parents yelling at them in the stands that they need to be built up or what, but it's that mental toughness, that resiliency, to build up. And so I'm curious, as you work with a lot of these, budding athletes around mental toughness and their mindset, and like, how do you get them to train themselves to do a lot of what you did, right? Of being that underdog, fighting through each step of the way, and having that resilience to say, like, look, this is my this is my plan A. I don't have a plan.
It's a very difficult question, because I'd have to start by acknowledging that if you're not about it, you can have a lot of character flaws, but if fundamentally you're not there for the right reasons, you're not there because like I'm desperate to be here, then it's probably not going to work. And you just have to go in and be honest with yourself. Now, when you're talking about how to get people through tough times, the first part of like my program, the first thing we do day one is we talk about our non-negotiable character traits and our superpowers. And so what you're trying to do is that, when you talk about elite level athletes, elite level performers, you talk about competitive mindset. You talk about presence, both internal and external. You talk about coachability, which, for me coachability is usually from a coach's perspective. Can I tell this person something one time and they do what I ask them to do? Does he look me in the eye? Does he shake my hand? Which are all important. But now flip it and take it from the athlete's perspective. Am I able to gather third-party information about my performance without taking in the subtle tone that the person directing to me is giving me, the attitude, the emotion? Can I take the emotion out of the equation and just receive objective information to help myself better what I'm trying to accomplish? That's a very, very important thing that we don't really talk about when we talk about coachability. The willingness to take short-term pain for long-term gain. Those things are mission critical to success. There's a couple more there as well, but you want to identify what your superpower is, what you're going to be able to lean on when times are tough, and you want to be able to hold on to that thing in the storms. But you also want to look at the things maybe in that list that you're not quite as good at. Maybe when you walk into a huddle, your presence, your physical presence, your shoulders down, your head's down, you're not exuding confidence. You're not having that good mind-body connection. You're not telling your teammates that, hey, I'm here for the fight. Those kind of things you need to be able to work on and become this kind of complete player. So you want to raise up those deficiencies, but you also want to be able to lean on that one thing that you think makes you special, makes you unique. And to do that, you really got to be able to open up and say, I need to identify this and be able to say it out loud. I think, especially at a younger age, athletes don't really even put in the time to think to do that.
That's great insight. I couldn't agree more. I mean, and I loved your first statement about you got to start with, do you even really want to be here? Like, do you really have that desire to go? Because I think I was actually just talking to one of our team members yesterday, right? And part of the conversation was, hey, you have all this potential, but just because you have the potential, and I think you have that potential, doesn't mean you need to do anything with it. Like I can't do anything with it. You're the only one that can do anything with it. And so, if you don't want it, that's okay. Like you have to make that decision. And this isn't, an underperforming person even, right? This is somebody that actually is performing really well, but they still have so much potential. But the conversation was, what do you want? What is your level of burning desire to capitalize on that? And I think a lot of people don't even think about that.
Well, you get caught in this rut of, here's the reason I started doing this in the first place. After I came back from finance and I started looking around. I got into this building, and you have all these world-class athletes, and you realize this generation's a little bit different. They're being coddled a little bit more from probably from day one. But a lot of these super athletes, when they're 12 years old, they're already told they can walk on water, they can do no wrong. They're not really coached; they're just coddled because they don't have to. They don't have to have technique. They don't have to have a routine. They don't have to have all these things because they're so unique. And then you get into a spot where everybody's unique. And the bandwidth and talent is like this now. It's not like this anymore. And you've got problems and you don't know how to fix your own stuff. And these guys didn't have the tools to fix their problems. And you get to the National Football League, you get to these elite level places, and they're not there to fix your problems. They're there to teach you or to tell you what to do, and you got to go do it. And if you can't do it, they'll find somebody who can. So the sense of, I guess what I'm saying is, even with your guy, certainly with these athletes, it may or may not be a sense of motivation, but what comes into play is, it's not that they're not motivated, it's that they don't know what to do. They're lost, and they want help, and they don't know how to ask for it, and they don't know what to say, and they don't know how to communicate it because they don't have the confidence to say, man, I'm realizing that I made it this far with a lot of the skills that I needed, I'm lacking. And I need to ask somebody, I need to like let down my armor, and I need to go, I'm vulnerable, I need help, and I need to figure this out. Because if I don't start owning what I'm doing, I'm going to have a problem. And a lot of guys just, it's like, it's easy to punch the clock, put time in, you get home, oh, I'm tired, I must have worked hard. Oh, I filled out 2 forms today, I must have done a good job. It's like, if you're doing what you can at the best you can for yourself, then you sleep well on your pillow. Otherwise, you might be lying to yourself, and that's a hard thing.
What's up, listeners? I just wanted to say thank you for being a part of the Hustle Nation community. We are absolutely thrilled and honored that you listen to our show. I wanted to take a break to share a special resource with you. I'm talking about our 2020 Vision Guide. This is a pivotal tool we use in our workshops where participants typically invest thousands of dollars for transformative experiences. Imagine having a crystal clear, actionable roadmap to not just meet, but exceed your personal and professional goals. That's the power of the 2020 Vision Guide. And here's the best part. We're offering it to you for free. This is your chance to leverage a tool that has propelled hundreds of people achieve unparalleled success. Visit our website now. I'm including the URL in the show notes below, where you can download our guide and start your journey toward clarity and achievement. Don't wait. It's time to create the life you deserve today. Now back to the show. I want to double down on that, what you said, Dustin, because we talked about that yesterday morning or the other day. Because we're launching a coaching program, and we kind of categorized 3 different types of people. We said we've got the high performers in life, we've got the low performers, and then we've got probably the majority of folks stuck in mediocrity land. And we kind of went through it. We said, the high performers, could you get more out of them? Yeah, there's always some you can get more out of, but they're kind of in a different class. Let's not even worry about them. The low performers, there's a lot of churn, there's a lot of turnover, but it's where can a business make the most amount of money? Or let's even think about professional sports. Where can a team take the Green Bay Packers last year? Mm-hmm. Where can a team with moderate, mediocre expectations get the most out of their season? They can go to all of those players that are deemed kind of right in the middle, and they can coach them up. And so I'm curious where when you look at team sports or when you look at corporations, you're working with business people, is it fair to assume that where you can help your company the most are those individuals stuck in a level of mediocrity?
See, that's such an interesting question because, I think within the last generation, we've gone away from the idea that you need to be good at everything, so you need to exploit what you're great at. And I don't know, if you take the Green Bay Packers as a very easy example. If you pointed to why the success of the Green Bay Packers this year versus the year before, you would point, not that the offensive line is always the grunt work, right, guys? They were better the year before than they were this last year. I mean, if you watch them like I watch them, they were better the year before. They were better with Adam Stanovich than they were without Adam Stanovich in the offensive line. When you point to the offense, what changed? Well, the best player on offense, Aaron Jones, continued to play at an extremely high level. The second best player on offense, the most important player on offense, Jordan Love, became a really, really high performer. And a lot of that to do with some of the other guys. So that's maybe one instance where you go, I might want to find who those elite guys are in my industry, and I want to make them like the most super high performing guys I can. And that's probably different in business, to be fair, guys, because if I really get 2% better in a confrontational sport on an elite level, I'm like 20 plays better than the next guy now. If I get a little bit better, I make a ton more money. I get a ton more notoriety because of 2 plays in a game that make a difference. Yeah. I don't know if you can necessarily attribute that the same in a business that has a longer timeline. The speed of operations is a little bit different. So in that case, to say, when you look at business, it's like, what are you really trying to do with any business? Well, you're trying to optimize it and make it more efficient. If you feel like you have the right goals in place and you're going to the right destination, it's like how to get there. I think in that case, what you're talking about, yeah, absolutely. Who makes it more efficient? Is it the line worker that makes it more efficient, or is it the scientist that creates the program that makes the line worker obsolete? And for each business, I think you got to figure that out, right? But I mean, I agree with you, but I think it's also case by case.
So, I think it's a great comparison, because I think, a lot of times with business versus sports, sports, there's a finality to it, right? There's a time frame that versus, business. I often talk about like it's the infinite game, right? It doesn't.
Yeah. See that Sam Sulek? Who said no?
Yeah, I'm trying to remember. Was it Cynic? I can't remember, but I think it might have been Cynic that first talked about. I don't know. I just hear it all the time, and I talk about it now, so I can't even attribute it right anymore. But that idea of that infinite game, when you're playing an infinite game. So I mean, take out sports, the individual athletes, they're playing an infinite game in life, right? And so the behaviors and the things that they're trying to do as a human, right, is more on the infinite game side. But it's an interesting point, because there is that constant battle of being good at everything isn't possible anymore, right? Like in today's highly specialized world, I think you're exactly right. I think in almost every case, you got to exploit your strengths more than just minimize all your weaknesses. But at the same point, that it's an interesting comparison between business and sports, because you also only have a limited roster in sports. So you only have so many spots, right? So that, to your point, the Jordan Loves of the world, when he goes from good to great, like he did, that impact is just much more sizable, because you can't have four of them. You're only going to have one of them.
And I think that, to Chris's point too, though, if what Total Athlete Development is the name of my platform, Process2Perform, Total Athlete Development. And when you're talking about any business, whether you're a small restaurant, whether you're a multi-billion-dollar corporation making microchips, it is about hiring the right people, having a good process for that, certainly, but then having a development plan in place where you're making the people that work for you feel like they are getting the most out of their opportunity as well. And whether that means advancement internally, whether it means they have to go farm out another job, if you have that system in place and you're known as a developer of talent, no matter, like, you can't find in the business world and the sport, you can't find a single organization that is known as a great developer of talent that is not a hot commodity for every person trying to find a job. You know what I mean?
Great point.
And that's, and that maybe, Chris, is where we would have really high common ground, is that the system that can figure that out. Like, if you're doing a program that can make all those guys, I can teach you how to develop into from medium to high performer. What a great marketing plan. It's very simple. Oh, you're kind of an average guy right now. You want to be special? Well, I've got a way to get you special if you'll buy into it. And now we really got something with proven results.
Well, let's take that question that I asked you a little further, and let's compare and talk about organizations. So in business, there are some organizations that are always successful, like an Apple, name companies like that. And then in sports, it's kind of similar too, where like the Green Bay Packers are always successful. Mm-hmm. And I don't want to pick on the teams that you've played for, but it seems like the Panthers have had a lot of the opposite luck or success for reasons that I can't identify because I've never played professional sports. But in business,
no
you have
that if you like.
Way too late, Mike. Maybe a professional podcaster is about as far as I could go. But in any instance here, you've got leaders, you've got culture, you've got facility. Those are three big things that make up business, that make up professional sports organizations. But what is it that makes, and this isn't just about the Packers, but what is it that makes some organizations, it seems like they always turn 5th and 6th round draft picks into success, whereas some organizations struggle to turn 1st and 2nd rounders into success?
I teach a coach development platform, and you have these different pillars of, I think, what kind of goes into that. You can look at it from the head coach's perspective, or you can look at the guy walking in the building for the first time trying to be a head coach. And first and foremost is culture, but I'll say it a different way. There's got to be a my way of doing business. There's got to be whoever's in charge. There's got to be this is how we do business here. And it could almost be like, I should be able to hand you if you walk into my building as a head coach, for example, I should be able to hand you a manual. And this is how we talk about success. This is how, this is our meeting times. This is how we talk about the different components of individual positional play. This is how we talk about tackling. This is how we talk about blocking. This is how we talk about footwork. This is how we structure our defense. Everything you want to know from a language standpoint. So you have these high standards that you're communicating clearly, transparently throughout the entire building. Everyone's using the same language to talk about the same things. That is one thing, at least in the sports world, I can tell you, is a huge problem. You got a bunch of different guys coming from bunch of different places trying to say the same thing with different words, and it gives the product, in this case, the football player, it gives them a reason to fail because, well, who said what, when, where? Another huge component, there's a couple components, but the other huge component of that I think is important to this conversation is coach development. And so you have your organization heads, you have your department heads, and then you have the workers that are underneath them. Those department heads are trying, especially you think about this in business as well. Those guys are, men and women, are trying to figure that out on the run without any professional development. And it becomes incredibly obvious when you get to the sports world and a guy becomes a position coach without knowing the aspects of the position. They just know the scheme. Or they become a coordinator without understanding how to release as a tight end in the offense that they're trying to run. And if you don't know those things like granularly, then you have a real problem communicating with people that are high performers, that are expecting a lot, what we talked about before, being put in position to find success. Like athletes are just like high level anything. They want to be put in positions to find success, and they want to be given the tools to be successful, and the rest is up to them. But if you don't offer those two things, then you have a real problem. And I think with organizations in particular, some of the lesser organizations, you find a lot of people that are out of place in those coordinator, position coach positions. So director, maybe regional manager positions, they don't belong there. They don't have the training or the expertise to do it, and they don't have the capacity to deal with the human emotion side of it as well. And now you have an issue where you've got people underneath them knowing more than them, being more ambitious than them, wanting it more than them. And I think that is a real problem if you don't have that right culture at the top.
So you've probably connected with hundreds of people that have played in the NFL, both teammates and people you went to college with. How common is that in the NFL?
Rampant. I asked this question of almost every coach, sports psychologist that's worked in the area, player. Like how many good organizations are there in the National Football League? And the consensus almost every time is 7 or 8.
Wow.
Are the Packers one of those?
Yeah, you're in good shape.
So Mike, one question along those lines. So, being a Packer fan myself, right? For the Lions come to mind, and I think of Dan Campbell and what he's done there. And I mean, this is an organization that no matter who they had, what they had, Stafford, Barry Sanders, all Megatron, all these different people, right? Like they had all these incredible talents, and they just had from an outside looking in, it seemed like they had a culture of losing, right? And
they did.
And what drove that, and I don't really know, but Dan seemingly has stepped in, and as a Packer fan, I don't really like it, but it's impressive to see is how he's turned that around seemingly through culture. But I'm curious, you have a much better lens on this than a layman like myself. Just curious from your perspective, what sticks out to you on what he's been able to do?
So Dan, this is when he first got there. Dan, I know Dan from Miami. He was the interim head coach. He's just a genuine good person. Like you will not find a person say a bad thing about him. You'll find a lot of people say bad things about me. You won't find a single person say a bad thing about him. He's that kind of guy. You can't help but like him. Even if you're mad at him, you can't help but like him. But Dan came in, and in my opinion, he's one of the first guys to go all in on, you know what, I'm going to have this building is going to be run by position coaches who have played this game and played it at a high level and are able to translate not only the X's and O's, because the X's and O's, anybody who's played Madden, I'm oversimplifying it, but anybody can do that. But do you know what it feels like, right? When it's 3rd and 8 and you got Warren Sapp lined up against you. Do you know what it feels like when Jerry Rice is sitting opposite on you and he's got to get 2 yards on the first day and you got to play press coverage? If you don't have those intimate things to transfer, you could be a great coach, but you are missing something. And so I think what Dan did is say, I'm going to take the thing that nobody has and I'm going to give it to every player in every room by putting a person there who's done it at that level. And then I'm going to allow these ambitious individuals who's already proven they have the ambition to excel in one of the most competitive arenas in the world. I'm now going to have them and give them the bandwidth, a couple years, to make sure that they understand the schematics. They understand the way that you communicate in a room, whether it's a room of the entire offense or defense or their individual positions, how you deal with relationships on and off the field. I'm going to let them grow into that part, because that part, while it's extremely important, it's not nearly as important as the experience these guys can give my players. And I think he did that, and he bought into that wholesale in a way that nobody else is willing to do, because it's such a good old boys organization, the National Football League, and nepotism, friends, all of this, all the hires that you see that don't make any sense, 3 years retrospect. He was one to just go in and say, you know what, we're going to do what's right for his vision. And if it doesn't work, he'll go down in a ball of flames. But it's paying off. And I honestly, I think imagine taking Mark Brunell out of a broadcast booth and going, you know what, you're going to be our quarterback guy for Jared Goff. I mean, think about the balls it takes to do that. He didn't care. He goes, this is the best guy for the job. I'm going to do it. He's an all-pro quarterback. Who could train my first round draft pick better than an all-pro quarterback? Yeah. Smart.
What's interesting about Dan Campbell, I remember the press conference at the end of the season, they lost a game that many would argue they probably should have won in the playoffs. And a lot of people pointed the finger at him for the coaching, and he was very aggressive on fourth down, choosing to go for it. I thought a big part of the reason they lost was because of those decisions, but who am I to judge? So I look at that, and I heard the press conference by mistake, and he kept saying, like, look, this is part of who the Lions are. This is who we are. We go for it. We're very aggressive. This is how we've always been. This is how we're going to be. And everything you've set up to now, Mike, that totally aligns with what you called a good leader or a good head coach. Is this is the expectations. This is the game plan. This is how we're going to do it. Like it or not, that's it. And he stood by it. And Lions fans, I know many of them, they love the guy. And they're upset they lost, but they're like, this is the recipe for us to continue winning. And I tend to agree with that.
Yeah, I don't think. Well, my best friend lives up in the UP up in north of Detroit, and he said there's no bigger celebrity in the area than Dan Campbell. The guy walks on water, and so when he says that, when he doubles down, to as you said, on his philosophy, his culture, what they stand for, it's like everybody wants to win, and everybody wants to win. Everybody wants to have a winner, but what people want is hope. People want to believe in something. People want to support something that they want to catch greatness and be able to see it just for that moment. And when Dan says stuff like that, hey man, this is what we're going to be. He's not making any apologies. He's not like Brandon Staley back with the Chargers. They make a couple mistakes. And he feels like he's defending himself all the time because they didn't get it on their fourth down runs. Dan's like, nope, we're doing it. This is how it's going to be. This is who I am. This is who we are. If you don't like it, you can go cheer for somebody else. And I think people want that. I think fans, casual fans, diehard fans, they want to hear that stuff. We can sit here as pundits and talk about whether it's the right decision or not. Who cares? That's what they're going to do every single time. You know what you're getting when you play those guys. And I think as a player, that's a team as a player that I would have never have thought who would want to go play for Detroit. Now I'll bet you they got to turn people away at the front door. They got so many players want to come play for that guy.
That's such a great point, because I see the same thing. What player wouldn't want to play in that environment? Yeah. Right? I mean, the true killers right now, if you're one that accepts mediocrity, you may not want to, but otherwise, why wouldn't you want to play in that environment? That resolute, we're aligned, clear vision, let's go together.
Absolutely. They're just, when you're playing, because if you look at professional sports, you look, both my kids play soccer, football, everywhere else. Every manager is a former player. Every coach is a former player. If you look at baseball, every manager is if you look at basketball, every manager, football. It's the only sport.
That's fascinating.
And it's not that it's not that it's a good or bad thing, but there are these, when you're playing and you realize the guy that's talking to you doesn't know what it feels like to do what you've done or what you have to do. You're always asking yourself in the back of the bus after the game, when you're on the airplane with your buddies, sipping some soda pops, man, what would it be like if there was a whole staff of really competent ex-players that played at a high level? Like Deion Sanders right now, bringing in Warren Sapp, bringing in Ocho Cinco, you're going, how much how wide-eyed those athletes are going to be when Warren Sapp enters the D-tackle room. I mean, are you kidding me? You know how good they're going to be? I mean, it's not even fair. And then if you can sprinkle in some real expertise, Ben Johnson, the offensive coordinator for Detroit, guy's a computer science major. I mean, he's a Mensa kid. He's a genius. He could literally rewire the entire network there if he wanted to blow the place up. I mean, he's that kind of smart, and he loves football, and he's got this thing in his head that he's got all these other coaches around that can coach those guys up to do exactly what he sees for his vision. And that's a dangerous commodity, man. That's really, really special. And not a lot of people are willing to put themselves out there and take that risk that Dan was to do it.
Love it.
That's interesting because, Dustin, I think we were just talking about the other day being player-led or being coach-led. And I think it was you, and we both kind of agreed the best teams are the ones that are player-led. And obviously, if you're a former player, I can only imagine what that's like and the impact that can make with people that are under you.
I think I have to agree with you. The player-led teams, the championship teams, they always talk about your player-led. You can have a really, like Andy Reid is clearly a very, very strong figurehead. But there's people who run the locker room. And I remember when I got to Green Bay, it was Leroy, Butler, Leroy. It was Santana. It was Reggie. It was, Brett to a certain extent. Chewy, Frank Winters, Free.
A lot of alphas.
Robert Brooks. Well, everybody thinks they're an alpha, right? But there's certainly a lot of guys who think they're out. But here's the thing that you learn when you're in that kind of environment, especially in a contact sport where everybody's got a little bit of extra emotion because there's always that, am I going to get dog walked by this guy? Am I going to get hurt during this play? So you got to, a lot of people build up extra emotion, bang their heads against the wall, try to get hyped up, listen to heavy metal music, whatever the case may be, try to get into this emotional state where you feel bulletproof. And one thing, because I was that guy in college, we're all kind of trying to figure it out. We're all trying to figure out how that should feel when I walk out. Should I be scared? Should I be so angry that I can't be scared? Should I want to hurt somebody? Should I be worried about getting hurt? How do you really optimize your performance? And what I found watching those guys was, if you have a group of people like that around you that have had success and know they're good, then they just go about their business. They prepare very hard. And come game day, they relish the fact that they've prepared themselves for success. They don't have to be the tough guys because they are the tough guys. And they can just go out and kick ass and play with their friends and have a real good time doing both. And that was one of the biggest lessons that I probably didn't realize until I was closer to being done, that I learned from those guys. Was like, man, I stopped, getting nauseous before games. I stopped having to play heavy metal music in my, head. It's like, once you realize you're good and the preparation work is what it takes to get there, not whatever you do 5 minutes before kickoff, then you can just enjoy being good, go out and play your best and learn and enjoy it from every experience. And I think that ability, the faster you get there, the more success you're going to have for a longer span of time.
Okay, Mike, final question, and this comes from the fan part of me. Who was the best locker room leader in your era, and what was maybe one of your biggest takeaways outside of what you just mentioned?
Best locker room leader. I'm going to go. I wasn't there for the totality of it, but I have to say this, and it's not the Packers, because I could mention any one of the guys I just did, and they were all phenomenal. The way that Reggie could obviously command a locker room just because of not only who he was, but his presence is the voice, the stature, the jokes, the ease of which he talks to everybody. Leroy with how quick he was with comebacks and jokes and just and confidence and one-liners. Those guys that's one side of it. There was this guy that when I was with Carolina, it was my third year, I think, and John Beeson came in. He was a linebacker for the University of Miami. I think he was a Butkus Award winner. And we had Dan, who was a Butkus Award winner. He had hired Thomas, and then they had Thomas Davis from Georgia, and then they hired Beast. And Beeson, like his fourth game in, and I remember, you don't really recognize him in training camp because it's just a rookie, and whatever. And then he's, you notice he starts hitting pretty hard for a rookie, and you got to kind of make sure you're buckled up tight when you hit him. But about the fourth game of the season, he asked the coach if he could talk before the game, which was like, shut up, get in the corner, And this guy was so about it. Like, he was so about that life, about he talked about who he was repping. And he talked about his family, and he talked about his mother, and he talked about the University of Miami. He talked about the locker room. And I just remember, like, there wasn't a dry eye in the room, and for the rest of his career, that's how he played every single snap. He was ferocious. He got, his career ended a little bit early because of injuries, but there's just so few guys who are just genuine. They're not looking for trouble. They're not looking to posture. They're not looking to be the tough guy in the room, because they are already. And they just are about they're about that life and what you're trying to do. And they try to do it as well as they can. And they want to spread that feeling, that vibe, that energy, that confidence. They want to spread that to as many people as possible. They have enough to give to everybody else. Most of us, even if at the elite level, we got just enough confidence for ourselves, maybe the guy next to us. But there's those very rare guys who just have enough for everyone. And Reggie was one of those, Brett, but Beeson, the way he could vocalize it, man, he was super impressive.
I love that you gave me something outside of the norm and not Green Bay Packer related. That's awesome. Mike, this is all really good stuff. And I just really loved how so much of what you talk about, even if we're talking specifically about football, almost everything is transferable to life, to business, to leadership, to family and relationships. And that's a nice change of pace from sometimes our normal leadership talk. So thanks for being here today.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It was fun.
Before we let you go, can you tell our audience more about your business and where they can connect with you online?
Sure. So process2perform.com is where you can find our business. And again, we work in mindset development, technical mastery, and ownership decisions. We work with athletes, athletes that are trying to find their ceiling. So, usually from 13 years up, all the way to professional athletes. We go through a 2-month course that is eight sessions long, 2 times a week. One of them's on video, one of them's live. We follow that up with, I should say that in totality, we spend about 4 months together, because the last 2 months we break down tape, because I think breaking down film and be able to learn from your good plays and your bad, being able to scout your opponent, be able to understand tip, tells, and tendencies in any walk of life. Just like, when we do this, when we have this interviews all finished and done, I'm sure all 3 of us will watch it again to see what we could do better, right? It's just part of the process, right? So going live is great. And then the next best thing you can do is review your work and see how you did, and maybe learn from some other people. And so spend 2 months doing that as well. But you can find that all at Process2Perform. You can find me on X, Mike Wahle 68, and then Process2Perform on Twitter. YouTube channel, if you like watching tape, we break down tape on Mike Wahle's Block Party on YouTube. Our channel is Process2Perform on that as well.
Yeah, your YouTube page is phenomenal. I mean, yes, there's a lot of Green Bay Packers stuff, which of course we love, but you do some stuff with college players and the draft, and it's pretty educational and fun. I enjoyed the Packer stuff, and that kind of got me sucked in just on my For You page, but I'll be a subscriber for sure. Folks listening, check out Mike, check out his business, Process2Perform. Mike, thank you for being here. For all the listeners, thanks for downloading another episode. We appreciate you. Until next time, peace.
Thank you for being part of the Hustle Nation. If you're serious about raising the bar in your personal and professional life and willing to go all in on your success, head over to hustleleaders.com. Here you can get access to our Hustle Productivity ebook, attend our Hustle Masterclass, or challenge yourself to the 30-day Hustle Challenge. Pairing these tools and training with the Hustle Nation podcast will help you advance to a whole new level. Until next time, stay hungry and inspire those around you to hustle.